Hello, everybody. Welcome. Summer has come to San Francisco in late August. Summer here, at least in my particular neighborhood, we have microclimates here. It tends to be a kind of a random, a week here of hot weather, 2 weeks there, 3 days here, and so forth. So yeah, it's it's not actually a season where I live. I think this is partly indicative of what would be here if there were no humans, but also where I live. But it's also indicative of desynchronization in nature, right? Many of the organs of nature that watch over, heal, make resilient, contribute to, harmonize together to produce synchronization in nature, which is a fundamental aspect of what organisms are and do together. The amazing capacity of my species to disrupt this is, well, in my view, I mean, it's been central in a lot of respects since the beginning of industrialization, but over the last 50, and then 3 times as significantly 25, and then 8 times as significantly 5 years. The repercussions of this problem are hitting humans right in their core, in their minds, in their behavior. There's so many tentacles on this octopus, but social media and the internet and our smartphones and shit are obliterating human relational intelligence, coherence, and they're not just obliterating the thing itself, they're obliterating its roots, right, by replacing them with mirages, right? Representations of what is being lost, right? You see this everywhere. But today I'm out for a walk, and it's a very interesting moment for me. I'm at the lake. It's beautiful. I will do some meditation. But I do have a topic in mind. I was listening to Jesse Michaels talking about UFOs on, I think, Chris Williamson's podcast, whose name escapes me at the moment. Which name escapes me at the moment. This podcast is Not a Who. And this is a topic that's been sort of stuck in my craw for a long time. And others have spoken on this with great enthusiasm, prodigy, brilliance, concern, and premonitory awareness, right? George Orwell in 1984. Also Animal Farm in its way. So many brilliant minds throughout history, many of them Russian, have spoken of this problem. In fact, Eisenhower, I believe, he made a comment to the effect that the primary threat to the people of the United States is not other countries. It's a faction, an array of factions within the power structure of our nation that fully intend to conscript the entire population, essentially. Right? War and the organs of dead inside governments that promote and sustain military opportunism, lying, and suck probably nearly all of the money. Right? We're talking trillions of dollars, often without any sort of accounting. Right? The Pentagon has failed every every examination of its accounts, I don't know, for like 20 years or something. And not modestly, like billions of dollars are missing each time, and much more can easily be hidden. So the topic in my mind today is the excuse for lying, misbehavior, cruelty, ignorance, power-mongering, that goes under the rubric of, quote, national security. There is no such thing, or rather, the thin shadow of something that might resemble that concern is being promulgated as an excuse for every kind of atrocity, and stuff that's just snuffing the environment, the history and future of life on Earth, the actual possibility of anything resembling the principles of a democracy or a republic. This is a fucking Trojan horse and a stalking horse and 9 kinds of other trap. We have nothing resembling national security. If we had something resembling actual natural security, Monsanto would be unable to poison the food, and other companies, Roundup, people that produce Roundup, etc. They would be unable to poison our own food supply. When people come here from other countries, they often remark that they feel incredible concern and pity because our entire, exceptions noted, our entire food production network is just pumping poison into children and adults and grandparents and everybody, the future, the past, fucking up our genomes. And whenever I've mentioned this topic in my recordings, there's an extreme risk of, some kind of accusation or whatever. Fine. I don't really care. So what we have is national insecurity, and this is parlayed into trillions of dollars of missing funds from the federal government and probably also from state governments. This is deeply tied into corporate complicity with power brokers within our governments, particularly the significant power broker that presently presides over the United States. But if security were our concern, all kinds of things would be different, right? There would not be the intention to spy on our own citizens, which is a violation of every principle you can possibly imagine. And what's the excuse? National security. What did 9/11 actually accomplish? It turned the United States into a capturable system of monetary, legal, military, and other traps, primarily for us. If national security were a priority, we would not be getting invaded by our own government, and very successfully by foreign adversaries, China, Russia, North Korea. We would not be complicit with countries engaging in open human genocide, and all kinds of features, right? What we have is the opposite of national security. There's no one protecting the population of the United States. Granted that our military-industrial complex has an interest in keeping the slave population modestly active, but they'll keep reproducing. So, what you really want is indenture, right? You want actual slaves. If you're the dead inside processes that run our economy, our government, the military, the prison-industrial complex, and so forth. So we live in an era where the idea of national security is being actively counterfeited and deployed against the history and future of the United States and her people. There's nothing in that structure that actually gives a flying fork about children or living places or the history and future of life on Earth, or any of that. The primary goal is convert assets to monetary representations and power exchange dynamics. And this is a zero-sum kind of game, right? It's a game where someone is going to win, might as well be me. It generates races to the bottom, which is where everybody has to defect from moral, ethical, responsible, compassionate behavior at the system level, right? You still get some rebels within individuals and communities that attempt to forge something that resembles communal intelligence, concern, awareness, healing, actual medicine, and so forth. Every feature of our society has been recursively re-infiltrated, compromised, and then represented back to us as an agent of virtue when the actual situation is almost precisely the opposite of that. I see a familiar friend. In the sky. Now, openly speaking about this, in fact, speaking about it at all, is not particularly dangerous because the systems involved are so well entrenched. They don't have to care about anybody's voice. Unless it starts to acquire, massive power in the social petri dish of our country. So I just want to be really blatantly clear about this. When you have forces, processes, cohorts of humans that are trading in the lifeblood and the history and the future of human lives, just like slave traders would, or worse, people who harvested humans, which is effectively what's going on, right? It's just slightly hidden it's slightly hidden in the garb of economics, selling products, right? If you look at the stories of the GMO organisms produced by companies like, companies we're familiar with, and the insistence on the conscripted use of only these seed crops once they're invented, you see the face of these processes writ in clarity. It's absolutely monstrous, right? So there's nothing that resembles national security, granted that it would be difficult to directly militarily invade the United States. But it's not hard to invade us in 17 ways that don't require guns and invent new ones every 10 minutes and then test them and deploy them. And you can absolutely believe that the countries that how should we put it, are the sort of traditional opponents of our nation, are really just using the internet and media, and particularly social media, as a military weapon against the minds, hopes, lives, and futures of everyone on Earth, but selectively America. Right? And this is not new. This is not a secret. There's no, the masks are thin and blatantly obvious to anyone, especially children, who even glances in their direction. Right? Anyone who has not been ideologically compromised will see this in the face of industry itself, in the banking system, in the educational systems, in the medical systems, in the military systems, in the prisoneering systems, right? It's everywhere. There's nothing as obvious to this. As obvious as this. If you came here from another world and watched what the humans were doing, first you would weep in agony for these poor beings, and then you would want to find out how something like this could possibly have ever occurred anywhere in the universe. And this has been a fascination of mine since childhood. I grew up during the Vietnam War watching people kill each other on TV very regularly. I also saw the Apollo moon missions, which were astonishing. And I'm aware of the controversy around those things. When I was a child, I was completely unable to understand why people would ever raise a gun to one another, or anything that was alive. And that's still a deep and core aspect of my heart and my mind and my spirit and my way of life. And understanding how these things got set up, not in declarable, determinant models, but rather in with perspectival toys that can illustrate the origins and trace back from the functions and the defections what kinds of processes and motivations led to this in our species. Fascinated by this. In our country, the deep and abiding ache to protect each other and love one another and, in a sense, to defend our people from bad actors is real in the human population. And also the lack of organized, intelligent cohorts of humans leads to displacement behavior like gangs and political parties, corporate, bodies of humans that depend on corporate influence to achieve their agendas in government.
Oh my God.
Cartels in South America, right? These are examples of humans wanting powerful, meaningful, effective roles and being, set up to serve horrifying processes and motivations. Right? Even things like sports teams, these are a displacement. Rock bands and so forth. Although with musicians, you have something slightly more capable of rebellious and revolutionary, reconciliation. So, yeah, this entire charade about national security has been used as an excuse to frack the American people by corporations. It started out relatively innocent looking with things like MySpace and what was that journaling app? Can't recall the name of it. But it quickly progressed to, Facebook, the capacity to directly modify human cognition, behavior, awareness, concern, instantaneously over population spaces of millions of human beings per second, right? YouTube, and then, TikTok was a very lethal innovation. And, the other night I was watching a recording, someone close to me, of something very beautiful and creative, and not self-aggrandizing at all, and educational. And I was like, this is the stuff that actually is real. So it's not like there are no examples of beauty or creativity or heartfulness or love in the space, but what dominates the space? And where does the money go? Right? Some influencer is making X million dollars a year. Okay. By doing nothing but broadcasting their content, what does YouTube get out of that? You think they're paying the lion's share to the creator? Unlikely, right? So yeah, we're in a real mess around this. It wouldn't be surprising to discover that factions interested in ratcheting down the slave collar on the American population within America, right? We're either complicit in or set up the various disasters, right, that lead to them gaining greater liberty and us losing it. Yeah. And see, if you're not a person, you can't really be punished, right? There's nothing to stop you from any degree of defection. I'm trying to think of even one corporation that, after having been discovered to be engaged in catastrophic, physical atrocities against the spirit of life itself and human beings everywhere. I'm trying to think of one that got the death penalty. A penalty I'm not in favor of for individual humans, but I am definitely in favor of for corporations. If they are to have legal rights, they must be subject. First of all, corporations should never have the legal rights of persons under any circumstances. They should be treated with incredible skepticism, doubt, and prove that you're good is ism. But yeah, this is really a mess, and it's been sitting on my heart for some time. I'm not saying anything here that's particularly insightful. Really, this is just kind of a first pass at the obvious wreckage of anything resembling security. If your food is being poisoned by your own people, right, from whence will you acquire security? Right? Security is clearly not, the recent attacks on the FDA and stuff like that are just unimaginable. I'm not saying there's no corruption within the body of the FDA, but if you take that thing down, Oh my God. I mean, the corporations like those I have pointed toward must just be absolutely cheering, right? This is exactly what they've been waiting for. Now, there will be fewer and fewer leashes on their capacity to unleash apocalypse on human beings. You know, we tend in the public to speak with great reverence and love of our children, but we live in a nation that not only has no concern for their well-being, the context doesn't care at all. It'll grind those up and, put them in graves. It does not care. Corporations are incapable of anything resembling compassion. They're not people, right? They're processes. They don't have emotions. They don't have personalities. They mimic all those things to humans, much in the same way very dangerous gods might. So these are some of my thoughts for the moment. I'm going to cool down now and meditate in the beautiful day. And perhaps I will return with further explorations.